Welcome to the Inside Myanmar podcast. Before we get into today's show, I wanted to let you know that we have a lot more written and video content on our website. If you haven't visited it yet, we invite you to take a look at www.insidemyanmar.org. In addition to complete information about all of our past episodes, there's also a variety of blogs, books, and videos to check out, and you can also sign up for our regular newsletter. But for now, enjoy what follows, and remember, sharing is caring.
And welcome back. Today we're going to be branching into what I think we can call a sister struggle of the Myanmar Spring Revolution, and that is the long-standing political and, before then, violent struggle that has faced Cambodia. And we are lucky enough to be joined today by Sochua, who I think we can fairly describe as an exile politician and a defiant opponent of the current and long-standing Hun Sen regime. So before we get into all of that, Sochua, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your time. I'd like to give you a chance to introduce yourself for our audience, because I think most of them probably are not familiar with your work.
Thank you very much for having me. A sister from Cambodia to all our sisters in Myanmar and brothers in Myanmar. I am Sochua. As I was introduced earlier, I am in exile, based right now in Providence, Rhode Island, one of the smallest state in America, in New England, America. I'm very far away from home. We still have to make it so that our minds are still clear to fight for democracy, for freedom, for justice, for our peoples. I was born and raised in Cambodia until I was 18 years old. And as you know, the Cambodia conflict started with the spread of the Vietnam War in the 1970s. By 1975, the Cambodia fell into the hands of the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge are the ultra-communists that committed genocide, that killed over 2 million people in Cambodia, or 1/3 of the population. At that time, the Khmer Rouge was backed by China. I would say at that time, it started with the China backed the Khmer Rouge, because the Khmer Rouge later on was split into two. One group stayed with China, and then another group went to Vietnam. I will talk about that later. Before the fall of Cambodia to the hands of the Khmer Rouge, I was 18. I graduated from high school. My parents sent me to France for further education, because, as you know, Cambodia was was colonized by France for close to 100 years. We got independence in 1953. I was not even born yet. At that time, also, when I left the country, I left for the very first time out away from a family that protected me, that gave me all the comfort because I was from a middle class family. We were very well protected, and when my sister and I were put on this flight to France, to Paris, it was so hard to understand, to believe that that was the beginning of a very, very long journey outside of Cambodia. But I knew something was happening, but I didn't know that it was an exile for 18 years. Because after, from 1975 to 1979, end of 1979, Cambodia was totally locked out of the whole world. There was an embargo on Cambodia because of the Khmer Rouge. No, there was nothing that no one knew about the inside of Cambodia. It was like the North Korea today. And but at the same time, the Cambodians who were already outside of Cambodia, we were students. We were very few of us. We struggled very hard to get more information outside from Cambodia, and later on, pictures of starving people or mass graves inside Cambodia came out when the Khmer Rouge, that was backed by the Chinese, by China, fell apart. But it was not the end of the armed conflict, of misery, of bloodshed in Cambodia. When the Khmer Rouge, that was backed by China, fell, the Cambodians that were with the Khmer Rouge went to Vietnam to ask for help from Vietnam to save Cambodia. Sure enough, Vietnam came with the army and occupied Cambodia from 1979, end of 1979 to 1989 or 1990. The Cambodia went into more armed conflict, but there was already by then, from 1980 to 1989, there was a resistance along the Cambodia Thai borders, because different factions from the groups led by the former king of Cambodia, by the Democrats, by the different groups went to the border to Thailand and established their resistance group. So there was armed struggle, and refugees, about a quarter, 250,000, 300,000 refugees were caught in that the armed conflict. To make it short, finally, the end of the armed conflict came on to 1991, when Cambodia signed a Paris Peace Accord with the intervention of the outside world to save Cambodia. And so there was a peace, there was a reconciliation, there was a peace accord that was signed by 18 international countries, very, very significant treaty that allowed the UN to hold the first elections, and then to allow the refugees to come home and to end the armed conflict. However, between 1980 to all the way to 1989, there were refugees from the refugee camps in Thailand that were spread all over the world. That's why today we have a very big Cambodian diaspora. We are about 3 million of Cambodians outside of Cambodia, including the migrant workers of Cambodians in Thailand, in Korea, in Japan. So coming back to my story, after the fall of the Khmer Rouge, and when there was this peace accord, I was able to go back to Cambodia. That was in 1989. I left Cambodia when I was 18 years old, so innocent. I only had high school education. And I went to America and I got a master's degree in social work. I went to work with the refugees in Thailand for 6 years. And I finally got back home to Cambodia in 1989. That took about 18 years. So when I went back to Cambodia, by that time I was married. I had two small children, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, two daughters. When I went back to Cambodia, I did not recognize the Cambodia that I left when I was 18, because the Khmer Rouge totally destroyed the society. The Khmer Rouge wanted to start a society from zero, meaning that there were anybody who had light skin, anybody who had any kind of education, anybody who wore eyeglasses, were killed, were massacred, were put in the mass graves, because the Khmer Rouge wanted Cambodia starting from year zero. People had to be equal. I mean, really equal, to that sense where there was no education, there was darkness, total darkness. So when I went back, it was the Cambodian people, my people. They are my people. I could not recognize my city. I could not recognize my people, because there was this Vietnamese occupation for about 10 years. Some people were talking in Vietnamese, and then during the Vietnamese occupation, the Russians came to where the main foreign elements inside Cambodia. So when I went back, although the UN was already there, it was really all of us rebuilding Cambodia together. There was hardly any electricity. There was no soap. There was no drinking water. But we struggled, and we make it happen with the help of the international community, with the Paris Peace Accord. That was very significant. However, I would say that the Cambodian society I don't think it's the same. It will never be the same because of the war, because of the genocide. You see, after all these years, I'm 70 years old now. I left Cambodia when I was 18. This is the effect of genocide, of armed conflict. So I understand very much the struggle of the Myanmar people. And I feel very close. I admire the Myanmar people for your struggle for freedom, for democracy, to be free. So coming back to Cambodia was like a dream came true. It's never home. Outside is never home. Home is where you were born. Home is where you learn the beauty of nature, the villages, the pagoda, your own language, your own food, But in exile, you survive. If you survive because you have to exist. But if you are just in exile and you don't try to come back, to fight back, to come back to your own country, I think the exile would be even more difficult. That's why when I went back, I jumped right into the reconstruction of Cambodia. I was in my early 30s, I believe. Yeah, about 32 or something like that. And right away, I identified myself with the women of Cambodia who were left without education. I went looking everywhere. And at that time, there were still mass graves. There were still bones, skeletons. I was looking everywhere for my parents. Never found them. Never found them until today. But I had to say to myself, let the past be the past. Learn from the past, which is no more war, no more bloodshed, peace and reconciliation. Be free. Work for a Cambodia that is free, where people can be like when we were together before the war, before genocide. So I went I walked around the country. I walked around the city looking for the Cambodia that I left. But then by then I realized that I cannot just keep on saying, I want to see the Cambodia that used to be. Then I start to realize that it has to be a Cambodia where it was at that time after the war. And the UN was there. So we were all talking about peace and reconciliation. We had the monks mobilized and then mobilized with the women. We mobilized for peace walk all over the country and to heal from inside. And we were able to do that. And then in 1993, there was an election that was held, that was sponsored by the United Nations. And Cambodia, about 98, I would say even 99% of the people of Cambodia who could vote went to vote and voted for change and voted to bring the old Cambodia back, which was to bring the King Norodom Sihanouk back. And the king's party, the royalist party, won that election. It was a new beginning for us. At that time, I was not in politics yet. I was still with the women's movement. I was mobilizing, organizing the urban poor women, because at that time we could only be around the big cities. We could not go inside the villages. So I was getting social services, shelter for women who were victims of domestic violence, setting up small loans, microcredit loans for women who had very small businesses in the markets in the city. But it was really the first time that Cambodia started to have a civil society, have small local organizations, women's organizations, youth organizations. We were all together rebuilding Cambodia. We were elated with the election, with the results of the election that was free, that was fair, no violence, very little violence. And we were set to go to build democracy. And I was so involved with the women's movement that I was recognized by the women. I was recognized by the political parties, and the Royalist Party at the time. The Prime Minister asked me to be his advisor for women's affairs, which I accepted. It was in 1995 or 97, something like that. And then when there was another election in 1998, I ran for the first time for a seat in Parliament, and I won. And then I became the Minister for Women. And it was the first time that a woman led this women's ministry, because in the past they couldn't find a woman qualified to run this ministry. It was unbelievable. But when I took over the Ministry of Women's Affairs and Veterans Affairs, because of my background with the refugees, because of my background with social services, my master's degree in social services, and then the networks of local organizations, the network of women's organizations, the women's ministry was very successful. We mounted a campaign against domestic violence, against gender-based violence. We changed a Cambodian proverb that says, men are gold and women are just a piece of cloth, to men are gold, but women are precious gems. Because a piece of cloth, a white piece of cloth, means that if it is tainted forever. If a woman is a victim of domestic violence, she is not just a victim, she is ostracized. She is no longer the woman that the society wants. See, we have to change that mindset. And women who were in the sex work, women who were poor, who lived miserable life, they are outside the society. So when I was in charge of the ministry, the first 2 months, we already had this campaign to call the women as precious gems, Neri Ratana. Ratana means gems, gold. And then the campaign was so successful that the domestic violence law was adopted, was drafted, was discussed, and during that discussion, the consultation, we opened up. We went everywhere as minister. I led the whole campaign throughout the whole country to talk about domestic violence, to talk about gender-based violence. What is domestic violence? What is domestic marital rape? What is how do you define a family? Because during the war, we were all separated. When we came back, maybe we couldn't find our parents. We couldn't find the real family. So we had adopted families. So these adopted families are by law of family. But in the adopted families, there are men who are not connected with us. Therefore, they take advantage of young women, of children. So that's why in the domestic violence law, we redefine the word family. After the war, family means anyone, all members who live under the same roof. If there was any kind of violations of violence inside that family, that domestic violence law can be applied, can provide protection for the victims. So that is how I went back to Cambodia, how I got involved in civil society, how I got involved in politics. That was my first entry, my first experience with a campaign, my first experience in running a ministry, my first experience speaking on behalf of the women of Cambodia. It was an incredible first step for a return to a country that was my own, but a country that was so different, but a country that I was put in a situation where I had to make decisions for the women of Cambodia. Along that was just the beginning of my first stage of entry into politics. And then I left the ministry. I joined the opposition party because the coalition government was dominated by the former ruling party, the party of Mr. Hun Sen, who is still in power after 40 years. He's still in power today, and although his son today is the prime minister, but Mr. Hun Sen still rules Cambodia today. So because the coalition was so dominated by the party of Mr. Hun Sen, I left the Royalist Party and I joined the opposition party, the party of workers, of laborers, of the labor movement that was led by Mr. Sam Rang Si, who was the finance minister, who also left the Royalist Party to run an opposition party. So I was with the party from 2004 until just recently, about 6 months ago. I left the party to lead the Khmer Movement for Democracy. Khmer means Cambodian, so it's a Cambodian movement for democracy founded by members of the Cambodian diaspora. the goal of the vision of the KMD, the Khmer Movement for Democracy, is to rebuild Cambodia for a better Cambodia, the Cambodia that is really, really is justice, democracy, human rights, equality, return to a Cambodia where we can apply rule of law, where we can apply international universal declaration of human rights, where we can use our constitution, and not a Cambodia that is dominated by one family, which is the situation today. So when the opposition became very, very successful in 2013, we won the election, but the results were when the results were declared, the real results were not declared. Mr. Hun Sen continued to hang on to power, and then finally dissolved the opposition, the Cambodian National Rescue Party, in 2017. And I that's when I left Cambodia again, in exile again, until today. And now the KMD, the Khmer Movement for Democracy, our mission is to unite the diaspora. As I said, we're about 3 million outside of Cambodia, mainly migrant workers in Thailand, and the Myanmar people know the miserable life migrant workers have in Thailand. So the KMD is to unite the people, to help to speak for Cambodians who are inside Cambodia but who cannot speak, Cambodians who are working in Thailand who cannot speak, and then we want to return to Cambodia by having starting with free and fair elections, and the return for again reconstructing Cambodia.
I mean, we certainly hope that that's what's going to happen. I think throughout that description, the parallels to Myanmar and the Myanmar crisis are just so incredibly strong. This single centralized authoritarian ruling regime, the marginalization of anyone that could be seen as educated or intelligent. I mean, fortunately, Myanmar didn't have the same level of purges as the Khmer Rouge, but nevertheless, under King Yunte,
A very strong military.
very strong military, and corruption, and just
Yeah.
the stories of the elections, just the way the government will go after their political opponents as soon as those political opponents become popular. It's horrific, and so one thing I want to ask here is, with the impact of the coup, because we discussed this previously, the impact of the coup in Myanmar on Cambodia. And I think one of the enormous differences between Myanmar and Cambodia is that Cambodia has come out of this incredibly long, incredibly violent, and incredibly destructive civil war, while Myanmar's internal conflicts have not been on that same scale. What was the reaction in Cambodia to the Myanmar coup and to the Myanmar people fighting back against their military?
We admire so much the students of Myanmar, the monks, the Buddhist monks, the ethnic groups, the women, the entire people of Myanmar. We realize that you have many ethnic groups which we don't have. We do have indigenous communities, but they don't hold the same kind of what you call the power, or they are indigenous people, and they have been assimilated with the Cambodian, the Khmer people, for a long time, although they are as indigenous. The problem that they face right now is the deforestation, the land grabs in their area. So they are losing their ancestral land. However, they will never dream of having their own land. They would never dream of taking up arms against the government because the groups are so small. You see, and then they have been forced to assimilate with the predominant Cambodian population a long, long time ago. Um, Coming back to the effect of the coup in Myanmar on Cambodia, when we followed your many coups. You have so many coups in Myanmar, right? The last one that no the orange robe, the
The
saffron
Saffron
robe,
Revolution. Yeah.
sorry, the saffron robe, because we are Buddhists as well, yeah, and many of our monks go to have educated in the temples in Myanmar. So the color of the saffron robe is very, very significant to us. It is not just respected; it is revered. And so the power of our monks in Cambodia and the monks in Myanmar are so totally different, because our monks, because of the genocide, during the genocide, know all the temples. We have thousands of pagodas in temples in Cambodia were totally destroyed. They were used as mass graves, and the monks were all defrocked and left the pagoda. There was no religion whatsoever for 5 years. But the monks, so after the war, after genocide, the monks came and we reconstructed the Cambodia by reconstructing our religion. So the monk came out, were ordained again. However, because of the trauma, because of the genocide, the monks in Cambodia have never recovered their power in the society or their political power. When I was young, the monks had political power as well as religious power and influence. But now, with the Hun Sen regime for the past 40 years, there are about 30,000 monks in Cambodia. In every village, you have more than 4 or 5 pagodas, small or big, right? However, it is now, Buddhism to us now is more going to pray. And we don't even understand what we are praying because it's all in Pali or in Sanskrit. Yeah. And Hun Sen is very, very aware that he lets the monk, the pagoda regain their political influence in the society. They would lose. Hun Sen would never continue, can never hang on to power. We had a coup in 1997. We had more people uprising in Cambodia, and the monks were part of it. And in 2013, again, when the opposition won, and then we were not allowed to take over power, the monks were with us, led months and months of protests in the streets. Because of the opposition, we were protecting the monks, and the monks wanted to regain their political influence in the society, and they wanted change as well. But now in Cambodia, they defrock monks. So when we were watching the uprising in Myanmar, we were watching the saffron robe and the beating, the killing of the monks in Myanmar in the streets of Rangoon. We felt that the monks were our monks. We felt that the students were us. We were um, so close. We feel so close to the people of Myanmar, but at the same time, we're different because of genocide. We could never. We again. It is really difficult now to ask people to walk together because they are so we are so traumatized by the war, and are even more traumatized now because of the 40 years under Hun Sen and the power of the courts and the prison. And although the prison in Cambodia is not at the scale of the prison in Myanmar, where there is no torture, there's no starvation, there's no uh, um, uh, killing or shooting or the mass arrest, the massive arrest, like in Myanmar. Even now, arresting one person or two people, it totally it's enough to paralyze the society. But we keep on watching the uprising in the latest one in 2021. We were saying, yes, um, we admire the Aung San Suu Kyi. We admire your students. We admire the incredible creativity of the young people, from your pop stars to your monks to your civil servants to your regular people who came out to the streets, and every single day you had something new that um, really the whole world was watching you. And even it is really, really incredible that ASEAN, that the world has forgotten Myanmar.
Mm. And I want to go back to that because you mentioned that the prison system or the mass imprisonment in Cambodia is not quite the same as it is in Myanmar today, the killings and so on. And I know that in Cambodia there is no death penalty, and this brings up a chapter that we saw earlier on in the coup when Cambodia had the chairmanship of ASEAN, and I believe it was Praksokon was trying to mediate with the Myanmar military, and I believe Hun Sen himself met with Min Aung Hlaing and tried to convince him not to execute political prisoners, which of course Min Aung Hlaing we now know did. He did execute them. Um, and this was something that I think a lot of people found very confusing because even though we don't know a lot about Cambodian history and politics and Hun Sen, we know that he's a dictator. We know that Cambodia is a repressive regime. And we didn't have a lot of optimism for Cambodia as the ASEAN chair resolving the Myanmar crisis. But this is something that struck us as very strange. Can you shed light on this? Why was Hun Sen trying to drag Min Aung Hlaing into some semblance of sanity and normality?
I would say Hun Sen was doing it for her show, for the international community to give him the spotlight. He was on the spotlight because Cambodia was the chair of ASEAN at the time. And Hun Sen, being Hun Sen, wanted to seize the occasion and show to the world that he is can be at the same level of world community of world leaders. And so he went to Myanmar, despite the fact that uh, the Myanmar people were on the street, the Myanmar people were being killed, the Myanmar people the international community was saying no. But Hun Sen wanted to also, he went there to talk to Min Aung Hlaing, to the military. Who knows what kind of deal he made with the military by going there. And then by saying that no death penalty in Myanmar, I think to me it was more like trying to say to the international community that he can be trusted as an international leader.
Mm, interesting. Interesting. I mean, it makes sense, even if it is a little bit, cynical, but it does make a lot of sense. And I want to look a little bit at the similarities here, because even when you were talking about your role as Minister for Women's Affairs, and you said you changed the idiom, the Cambodian idiom, to women are precious gems. Uh,
Mhm.
even that, it struck a chord with me because you said in Khmer it's Ratana, and
Mm.
that exact same word exists in Burmese as well as Yadana.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
so Ra is pronounced Ya
yeah.
in Burmese. So
Oh,
Yadana, but it means gems, and it's a common name for girls. You
mm,
see it in a lot of different shops. It has a very strong place within Myanmar culture, Myanmar society. So I just immediately I'm like, oh, I recognize that word
mm.
um, from Bali. So the similarities are strong, and I believe that you've actually visited Myanmar multiple times. I think you've even met
Yes,
Aung San Suu Kyi.
yes. I was at the time. Because of my experience as a women's minister, and then in my party, we were very uh, active. The women's wing of the party was very active. We conducted a lot of training for female candidates, and we won. The female candidates really won. And my experience of promoting a women's voice in politics, and not just promoting but really setting the goal, setting objectives, clear objectives, like for example, for on the party list, if the woman is not at the number one on the top, she is number two, or vice versa, or she's number three, but the list has to have a woman candidate, but not the one at the bottom. We will not accept. It has to be the top three. One, two, three. She can be number three. She can be number one, number two. But if she's number 30, that's not it's insignificant. So I went to train the women of NLD, and that's when I met the Aung San Suu Kyi, and we were able. And then I went back again when I was the member of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. It was to conduct a assessment for the elections before, when NLD won again landslide, and also to look at the situation of Rohingya in Myanmar.
Absolutely, and I find that interesting that you're training with them and they're training with you. That the resistance movements or the pro democracy movements seem to have this long standing agreement with each other and cross training and interactivity. Is there Are you connected with other movements in the broader sort of Southeast Asia region? Are there democracy movements, for example, in Laos or maybe Vietnam or Thailand that you've also worked with and that you are in contact with?
No, mainly Myanmar and Thailand at the time. Yes, Thailand, when I was still able to go to Thailand. I am blacklisted. I cannot go to Thailand. I was because Hun Sen uh, had made a request to the ASEAN countries to put the opposition members, the top leadership of the opposition in Cambodia, uh, on the blacklist. So we cannot go to certain countries in Myanmar, in ASEAN countries. I would very much like to go back to Thailand to do training. Yeah, we have networks with Thai women, with the Thai organizations, but we want to be able to be there together, training together, learning from each other. And there were some members of parliament from NLD who came to visit us when we were still in Cambodia, when the opposition was still functioning. So we did a lot of uh, shared training, not just on women, but on the issue of human rights and democracy as well.
That's incredible. And just because we are here, it would not be forgiven for me if I did not ask you, what was your interaction like with Aung San Suu Kyi? What was your impression of her? What can you tell us about that? Obviously she's been imprisoned yet again, unfairly and illegally. Um, and we are very concerned for her welfare and her safety. She's, I think, forefront in everyone's mind. So if I didn't ask you, the audience would not forgive me.
How can I say? Admiration, respect is more than respect. How can you not admire and respect and adore Aung San Suu Kyi for her struggle, for the history of her family, the sacrifices, um, her. We had a conversation. We had a whole hour, more than once. I was very impressed because she served us tea herself at her home. It was at her residence. She served us tea, and we had a real conversation. I was struck also by the softness, but at the same time, the toughness. Yeah, very Asian women. I don't want to say it's Asian women, but it's that quality of gentle but firm and leadership that has compassion. You just can tell.
But the very important question is, what is the work that you are able to do? And the reason I'm asking this question is because within the Myanmar conflict, we have a war ongoing, a civil war ongoing. But one thing that has consistently come up and made the Myanmar conflict stand out is the role that the National Unity Government has taken to actually be a government and to focus on things like government services, to focus on providing healthcare and education and infrastructure and justice. And the non-violent, non-combative element of resistance is incredibly vital, because warfare without government civilian support just leaves the country burning and it achieves nothing. And you yourself are now working as exile government and opposition government, and are working resistance to a dictatorship without violence, without warfare. And this dimension is incredibly important and historically, I think, overlooked. And so I would love to hear what your understanding of this is. How are you hoping to be able to affect change in this way? What is the plan, or what is the hope for you to bring about lasting change in Cambodia without the use of violence?
We are very determined. We are certain that Cambodia will have peace, and because we will be able to go back home. And I don't think Cambodia will be like Myanmar, where there will be another war or armed conflicts that will tear the people apart or the country apart. Not that I wish that to happen in Myanmar or anywhere else, but is this taking up war arms is a necessity? When I heard that there is a part of NLD, there is a group that will go for arms conflict. We were shocked. We were not in favor, and then the question is: so what's the solution? Do we wait for ASEAN? Does Myanmar continue to wait for ASEAN, for the international community? No. And knowing the tenacity, the resilience, the pride, or the history of the people of Myanmar that have suffered so much, have fought so much, this is the last. I hope this is the last fight, the last time that you have to take up arms. And on the battlefields, the sacrifices of the young people, the students who left home to go to be trained and to take up arms and to win grounds. It's like Ukraine. Compared to, it's not exactly the same, but I'm talking about the fight of a people for your own nation, for your own life, for your own identity, for to maintain, to win over an army, a dictator, I think that kind of resilience, that kind of tenacity, the whole world need to say, uh, to make it shorter for the people of Myanmar or for the people of Ukraine, make it shorter for people in Palestine, in Gaza, or same as the suffering of the people in Israel as well. The suffering of the people must end, must end. What we need right now are leaders, the international leaders who have the courage. I think we have the problem is in the world we have leaders who have very little courage. They are so you talk about election to elections to elections and that oh it's not resolving the the suffering of the people. And you look at the role of the United Nations, it's insignificant. The Secretary General of the United Nations today is just not someone who should be there. It needs to change. Uh, if we don't have the United Nations, so what's the role of the United Nations? So coming back to the NLD in the civilian government side of the NLD, I have also full respect. You have your health ministry, you have your social service ministry, humanitarian, I think it's called. I met many of the ministers and members of parliament. For us, for the Khmer Movement for Democracy, we are looking at the experience of NLD, of NUG, the National Unity Government, as well as the Tibet the government, and we are learning. The one thing is that it needs to unity is important. I'm saying again, with 3 million Cambodians outside of Cambodia, unity. First of all, unity. Stop feeling sorry for ourselves. Stop saying Hun Sen has all the power, we can never win. Stop saying that, China is in Cambodia, Vietnam is in Cambodia, we will never be able to win the war, to win, to go back to Cambodia. Stop putting that into your mind. Stop living in fear. One thing I learned from Aung San Suu Kyi is living in fear. I refuse to live in fear. Live beyond that. That's one thing. So unity. The second is to have an administration, have a strong movement that can take care of the advocacy side of it. Like for example, we have to work with the Congress, the new Congress. We have to work with the EU. We have to work with Australia. Who is doing that? Not the people inside, it's us. But in us, we are so many. If we don't go and present a common agenda to the to U.S. Congress, they don't want to listen to so many Cambodian groups broken and divided. They want to hear one agenda. So we're working toward that. And then later on is to have representatives of the Cambodian people as members of parliament outside of Cambodia. This is something that we learn from Tibet, and we see that you also have your members of parliament. You have representatives elected by the people of. So we want to be outside 3 million. We have elected representatives. Cambodian people elect them to represent us in America, in each state in America, who are our elected representatives. Because at the end, we want to be able to go to the United Nations and say, and go to the Paris Peace Accord signatories and say, we want free and fair elections. Unless you are with us, for free and fair elections and work on that between now and 2028, there will be another rigged election. There will be an extension of the regime, of the dynasty. We won't accept that. Then we also want to be able to be prepared to go to the United Nations and say the seat of Cambodia has to be occupied by representatives that are elected by the people of Cambodia, by a leader that is really elected by the people of Cambodia through free and fair elections.
And then this is the important follow-up. If that happens, my understanding is that so much of the assets of Cambodia are controlled by the Hun Sen regime. If you do see free and fair elections, you do see democratic change, a new government comes in, what would the position then be in Cambodia? Would you be able to rebuild the country, or would Hun Sen and his sort of oligarchs still functionally control everything?
Oh, we have to deal with, for example, like the Myanmar movement, deal with sanctions at this moment, coordinated sanctions by the international community. We can't wait until we go back into Cambodia. Cambodia, like in Myanmar, is the base for cybercrime. Close to 40% of Cambodia national budget is the value of the scam
Did you say
from
40%?
40%.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. 14 billion, 14 billion from 2023 that was extracted from cybercrime inside Cambodia.
Oh my god.
Think about Myanmar right now. So our movement, we are very, very outspoken about that too. And then we are outspoken on human rights. We report to the national. Cambodia is special. Cambodia has the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights. So we work with the UN Special Rapporteur. I think Myanmar also has a special envoy for UN envoy for Myanmar, right? So we work with the UN on in terms of giving reports, in terms of keeping the UN accountable to to the the Paris Peace Accord that was signed under the auspice of the UN. And we also are very, very aware, work very aware of the massive scale of deforestation and land grabs.
Because I do remember as well the environmental damage that was done under the Khmer Rouge, this obsession with turning Cambodia into the world's biggest rice producer and just destroying huge amounts of land in the process. It's awful. So, from the perspective of bolstering the people, do you think that a victory in Myanmar would accelerate the cause of democratic change in Cambodia?
I think so. I think first of all, we have to if every member of the ASEAN community, ASEAN member state, is a democratic is run by a democratic government. ASEAN will be stronger.
Mm,
Therefore, we can, for example, in Thailand, if the opposition, the Future Forward, that now is the People's Party, win the election next time, they will have a much more open, much more engaging alliance with the opposition in Cambodia. Um, I think that's why ASEAN is important as for each member of the ASEAN, but people of ASEAN must be very active and not just let the leaders go to their summits and come back with the same old thing. I think I want to say from what I learned from the people in Myanmar, from what I learned from the Aung San Suu Kyi, is that democracy is worth fighting for, will win at the end. And I wish for Aung San Suu Kyi to be released now and regain her position to lead a Myanmar, that the Myanmar people of different groups can live together, work together, and rebuild the Myanmar that you all want. It's the same for Cambodia, the Cambodia that the Cambodian people want.
Since the coup, Better Burma has provided consistent humanitarian aid to vulnerable communities across Myanmar. Over time, however, we have also come to realize that another consequence of the coup is a severely collapsed economy. Trade and tourism have almost entirely evaporated, and local artisan communities suddenly found every opportunity of continuing livelihood closed off to them. To help support those artisan communities, Better Burma now brings items direct from their workshop into your home. These lovely pieces from a far corner of the world will not only light up your room or make a lovely gift for a loved one, but they'll also help dozens of artisans create sustainable businesses and livelihoods. Part of each purchase will also go towards our ongoing nonprofit mission. To see these beautiful crafts, visit alokacrafts.com. That's Aloka, A-L-O-K-A, crafts, C-R-A-F-T-S, one word, alokacrafts.com. Of course, as is your preference, you can also consider making a donation through our normal channels. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.
Oba yarananda dayananga yaranaya dayanam boda yaranam